Hello and welcome back to Polytoots. We are going to be taking a look at oh my god. We are going to be taking a look at Unity's new shader graph node-based thing. Probably should have prepared what it was I was going to say for this video, but it's this kind of thing. So you get the idea. It's the same as ShaderForge or Amplify, and I'm sure there are others. So the first thing we're going to look at is how to actually install it, and there are tons of tutorials for this at the moment, but essentially if you're using 2018 or later, basically the latest version, you'll have this package manager up in the window menu, I guess, yeah. And if you click on all, you need to install two things. The first is the lightweight render pipeline. The button to install it, if I click on something else, it'll be up here, but because I already have it installed, it's not there. So you want that and just the shader graph. So you install both of those, and then once those are installed, you want to actually create the lightweight asset, and you just do that by right-clicking, create, rendering, and there it is. And so that will just drop something in there, which you then need to place. And I know this is just a bit of a hassle, but whatever. In your project settings, you go to graphics, and here is where you want to just drop that in. Without that, nothing works. So yeah, make sure that that's on. And also they recommend switching your color space over to linear. I don't know how necessary this is. It seems to work with both, but either way, if you wanted to do that, it's in project settings and player, and then just click on other settings and it'll be there, rendering color space. So that's it. That's all you need to do to get set up. If you want to keep sort of following the development of the shader graph and the lightweight rendering pipeline, I will link a video in the description of a guy, I can't remember his name, I'm sorry, that talks about it. It's a bit too much effort for me. I don't plan on using shader graph until it's done. I'm going to be moving over to Amplify now that ShaderForge is no more. If you're wondering what these things are in my scene view, I just have the Pro Builder poly modeling things and the grid tool installed, so ignore these, they're not for this tutorial. So we're going to be taking a look at a water shader, and most people seem to build these in a similar way. I picked up a couple of tips and tricks over the years. One of them for the actual sort of coloring of the water, I will credit to the guy who I got the idea from, and it's I think it's called 1 Month Studios or something like that. Oh my god, I should have looked this stuff up before I started recording, but either way, I'll put a link to his tutorial where he makes a really nice sort of ocean shader in both ShaderForge and Amplify. It's a really good tutorial. A lot of people seem to copy it without giving credit, and it's obvious that they are copying it, and it's a shame. Though that said, maybe the 1 month dude, maybe he stole it from someone else. So I don't know how far this rabbit hole goes, but either way, there's a technique that I'm going to be using that I have definitely learned from his video, so I'll explain more about that later. So we're going to just come along and I'm going to delete both of these because we don't need them. So we're starting from scratch. I'll just get my sphere out of the way. We will use it a bit later. So we're going to create shader, and you want one of these three. Which is the graph. Basically, if it has graph after the name, then that's the one you can actually kind of edit. And we do want the PBR one because if we want it to be physically based, we want it to render reflections and whatnot rather than the unlit. And we'll just call this one shader graph water. And now we'll just create a material. Shader graph water. and we'll just drop that shader over that material. So this material is now using this. So we'll put that on our plane, and then we'll click on this bad boy twice. And that's weird. It must have remembered the shader that was there before, maybe because it had the same name. So we'll delete that. You could just, I suppose, pause the video at this point and just copy these nodes, and then you wouldn't have to follow along with the tutorial at all, but whatever. So let's try this again, and we'll just give it a different name. Maybe that's a slight bug. And I wonder if you can do this. Oh yeah, so if you right click on the shader itself and then create a material, it will propagate it accordingly. So let's put that down there, double click this. Okay, good, it's actually blank this time. So this is your shader, basically. This is where you will hook everything into. You might be familiar with a lot of this. It's very similar to sort of the standard asset. The only difference is now you have complete control as to what goes in here. I say complete control, it's still early in development. There's a lot of stuff that I wish I could show you that I can't, to do with sort of depth or vertex offsets or edge detection for things like foam, you know, where it sort of meets a shoreline or some other object intersecting. So we can't do any of that at the moment. Well, sorry, you can do the vertex offsets, but that's, you have to update, and I can't be bothered to do any of that. Again, that's one of the videos that I'm going to link. He will show you how to do all of that cool stuff. But we're just going to go ahead and make just a basic sort of water shader here, and the foundation of any water shader is the normal map. So we're just going to drop in texture. I've just hit spacebar, by the way, to bring this window up. You can also right click, create node. They don't have a super intuitive user design, but you know, it'll do. So we'll get a sample texture 2D. You could just drop a texture in here, link that in there, but you want to enable an actual property here so that we can drop the texture in. And the way that Shader Graph handles that is it's a little strange compared to, say, Amplify, which follows the sort of like the Unreal way of shader nodes. Shader Forge sort of, it handles it a lot better, I think. But either way, for this one, Shader Graph, I'm probably going to get confused and say those names all weirdly. I'll try to just stop talking about them. But we want a texture 2D asset, and this one we can actually convert to a property. So now it's over here. We could, if we wanted to, we delete this and that, we could come here and do it this way. So we create the property first, let's say normal map, and we drag that into here. That's another way to do it. So either way, this one hooks into your sample texture 2D, and make sure you want to change this to normal map because we don't want a default texture. So we'll come along and we'll just hook the RGBA into normal. And we'll just hit save. So now we can actually put in a normal map here, and I have one ready. It's just one that I found from the Googles, and it was a grayscale image. Guess so, something, I guess it looked a bit like that. Oh no, wait a minute, so default apply. Yeah, so I may have gotten that from Google, or it just looks some sort of cloud-based thing in Photoshop. But either way, if you bring in a grayscale image or something that isn't quite right for a normal map, Unity does have a nice little feature to convert it. It's not the best, but a lot of times it'll do. So we'll just drop this down onto that, and already you can kind of get an idea as to where this is going. It's a bit like wet concrete at the moment, so we're going to adjust our gloss, or rather the smoothness as Unity calls it. Now I normally go for a value of about 0.71-ish for water, and see, or already it's kind of looking a lot more glistening. If you wanted to control that on the the material itself as a property, it's very similar to what I just did. You can either kind of come here and make a vector1, or just space vector1, convert to property, and we'll stick that into smoothness. And we'll expand this, give it a rename. I'm going to call it gloss, because I don't like calling things smoothness for some reason. Maybe I just don't want to adapt to the new system, but there we are. So now that's there, and we can adjust it. Not that I ever do, but there we are. So we have our normal map all good to go. Now we want to animate it, and in things like Shader Forge and Amplify, you would use a panner node, but the way that Shader Graph handles that is with a tiling and offset node. So you want something like this, and the offset value here, which is a vector 2. This is the one we want, and the reason it's a vector 2 is it's two directions. You know, it's sort of your x and y, so it's either going to scroll down this way, or it's going to scroll across the other way, or if you enable them both, it will kind of come at you in a diagonal direction because it's scrolling across both. So we want to just basically animate one of these values. So we want to plug in our own vector 2 into this, and so we want to go vector 2, and again it's just x and y, so we will specify just the y for now, and we'll hook that into the offset. Sorry, no, wait, we don't. Sorry, that's my bad. We don't want to put that straight into the offset because we need to be using a time node, because at the moment there's nothing here telling any of this to animate, and if we use a time, then it will do something over time, like per second or per frame. So we're going to bring in a time, and this we will multiply by our vector 2. So space multiply, and these windows always come in so huge. I don't know why people can't just basically copy the way that Shader Forge had sort of done all of their UI and the way that you kind of use it, but it is what it is. So we're going to hook up just the time to our vector 2, which is only working across the y, and that is what is going to go into tiling and offset. So if I hook this into the UVs of our texture 2D and I hit save, you can see that it's starting to scroll. It's definitely way too fast though, so what we probably want to do is add in another multiply down here, because we need to affect the speed ourselves. So drop in another multiply. Oh, by the way, you can, if you want, just grab a node and then copy paste. So we want that, and we will do this. We'll bring both of these back a little bit, because we're going to eventually overwrite that. And so then we just want another vector 1, and we'll convert this one to a property and rename it as speed, or pan speed. Default value of, I don't know, 0.1 or something. And so now that will hook into our multiply node. So now if we hit save asset, we have our pan speed. So we can adjust this, and it'll either go fast or slow. So we'll just do 0.1 for now. So that's a good base. The next thing we want to do for kind of a weird sort of fluid motion, basically we want the gloss to kind of be moving and bouncing around. We're going to just use the same normal map but scroll it the other way, and we're also going to change the scale. Ordinarily I would change the scale sort of based on world positions, so you can change the scale in the shader itself, but at the moment, as far as I've been able to determine at least, there's no append node in shader graph, so you can't sort of append an X and a Z world axis together. Maybe it's just me being stupid, but for now it's just not something that I can do. So we will copy this and because we're going to be using the exact same normal map, we'll just bring that into there. Let's move these back a little bit. And so now we want to create another sort of offset, but in a different direction. And while we're at it, we might as well change the scale here. So the tiling here affects the tiling amount of the texture itself. So we want one to be kind of big and one to be small. So we'll do that at 25% of what will be the other one. Apologize if this doesn't make any sense just yet. So this will be 1.1, that'll be 0.25, 0.25. And we've already got our time node here with the speed. So the only thing we need to do is hook up another vector 2 with a multiply, because we want to have a different offset. So we copy and paste these nodes, and for this one we will do -1 and put that into that, and bring our time into, oh sorry, I put this in the wrong one. It doesn't really matter if they cross over, but for a nice kind of flow, just keep it as is. And then that can go into your UVs. And now if I hit save, nothing will change. I guess aside from the speed for some reason. Oh no, sorry, because I changed the scale. So it's moving, it's technically moving at the same speed, but because it's a larger texture, it's moving quicker. So now we need to, actually before I do that, so let me just show you. If I disconnect this top one and I will just use this one. So that has the normal map at a scale of 1 moving the other way. And we want to basically combine these two, and the way that it's taught in a lot of clips, I'm getting a weird bug here. If you find that your mouse kind of just becomes a bit unresponsive and windows don't really do what they're supposed to do, just save your asset, close the tab, and double click on it again. Yeah, okay, so now I have control back. Yeah, sorry, so as I was saying, a lot of people teach this as lerping these two together, which is not the way you want to do it, and I'll explain a bit more about that later, but the correct way to do this is with a normal blend. It's designed specifically to blend normal maps, so it seems like that is the kind of thing that you would want to use. But there we go. At some point someone taught it wrong and everybody's just been copying it, so there we are. So save that. So now we have this moving line. It's really fast though, so we'll change this. Ideally as well, you'd probably want to control each of these speeds independently. And again, check out the video of the 1 month studio, or whatever his name is. He goes into detail with all this stuff, and it's pretty nice. So I'll do something like that. That's okay, still a bit quick. Yeah, okay, there we go. And so that's, I mean, that's most of the work done. That's all of our normal map stuff. So the next thing we want to do is just affect the color, and this is the tip that I got from 1 month studio, which is just to use a Fresnel that changes the color based on view direction. And so we'll start by just adding in a Fresnel effect. Although before I use this, what I'm actually just going to do is just plonk down a color, and we'll set this to a property. So rename it as, I don't know, main color. Main. And I mean, I'm sure it's obvious what's about to happen, but just in case. So we have a color node, and now we can adjust the color of our material. So we want to basically change this color based on where we're looking, and we use the Fresnel as the mask for that, and this is where you would use a lerp. So I want to use a lerp. I clicked on the wrong thing. Try again. So I want to use a lerp, and let me just disconnect this for now, and I'll show you what a loop does. Let's make a new property. Color again, and we'll call this top color. So I just realized I'm missing the U. And give this, just to make sure it works, we'll give it a bright red, so we'll drag that into there. So now we have our two colors, the main color and the top color, and we'll just plug one into A and one into B. And just for a demonstration, I'll create a slider, which is just a 0 to 1 value, and let me expand this out. What is my main color? Default is black, so let's make this green. So if it's 0, it's going to be green, and then 1, it's going to be red. So it's just looping between these two, and 0.5 is, the midpoint. So this is what a lot of people do to blend their normal maps. They'll have two normal maps feeding into a loop, but the problem with that is when you're using, like, say, a 0.5 value, you're basically halving the power of both of your normal maps. So yeah, again, just we want to just use a normal blend. But anyway, we're going to continue. So we're not going to use a slider as our mask. We're going to use the Fresnel. And we'll just hook this. We'll just put this straight into the albedo. And because I'm using crazy colors, it should be quite obvious what happens. Okay, I seem to have gotten them the wrong way around. My main color and my top color are swapped. So could just rename them, but I'll just do that there. Okay, so as we look at it from here, we get more of this main color here. And then as we view it from the top, we get this color here. And we can adjust the power of this, of course, by just creating a power node. And we'll connect that to A. And then again, just another vector, which will convert to a property so that we can access it. Vector 1, so rename, and we'll just call this Fresnel power. And we'll give it a default of 1. And then that goes into the loop. Okay, so now we can actually control it from here. So yeah, there we go. Obviously color's pretty important when it comes to a nice looking water. So I'm just going to mess around here a little bit. Something like that is fine. And that's pretty much it. I can't really show you anything else. Nothing like the depth or edge foam or vertex offset, because it's just not something that I can do in this current version of Shadergraph. I will just show you one little sort of cheap trick to get a kind of it's a very fake depth, and it's very dependent on viewing angle. And so what I'm just going to do is I'll change my surface mode over to transparent, and I'm just going to grab the invert of the Fresnel basically. At first I'll show you what happens if I just grab the Fresnel itself. So I'll stick that into alpha, hit save, and it should be quite obvious already, but I'll bump up the power a little bit. So from this angle we're getting sort of more opaque, and then as we come up it's getting transparent, and so we're just going to do the opposite of that essentially. So we're going to just add in a 1- node. Plug that into your alpha. and you get something like this. And again, it's not actual depth. It's just a bit of trickery depending on your viewing angle. So if you had a game that was always viewed from, let's say, sort of this angle, then something like that could work for you. It would be a lot cheaper than having to calculate scene depth, but it's not the best result. I mean, if you can see, we can see sort of the edge here, but as it comes down to the bottom, it's definitely more opaque. And yeah, so that's just it's one little trick. It won't work in a game where you can view your water from multiple angles, even if you were to try and do something like this. And let's adjust it a tiny bit. So we can see a bit here, but not much there. But if I were to just duplicate this and push it all the way out there, if this was using proper depth, because this sphere is further away, we wouldn't be able to see all of this. So yeah, again, it's very use case scenario, but just thought I would show it off. So that's about all I can show you for now. As I said, it's still in development, so they're constantly sort of adding things, and the video that I've linked in the description will show you how to sort of keep up to date with all of this. But yeah, for me, I'm just going to be using Amplify from now on. I will be following Shadergraph, and as soon as they release something more cool, like once the append comes along, I'll be able to do a lot more to the water, similar with depth. So hopefully it won't stay as it is. Otherwise, I guess one of the next tutorials you'll see from me will probably be an Amplify shader tutorial. But either way, I hope you learned something, and thank you for watching.